6 months into retirement, I was reorganizing my husband's sock drawer by colour and fabric blend. He found me, holding a pair of navy cashmere socks, and said, "You're managing socks now. We need to talk." I've been retired for years now, and that was the moment I understood the one habit that makes the transition so much harder than it needs to be. It's not about being busy. It's about the need to be needed and filling every quiet space with a manufactured sense of urgency. I thought it was just being good at my job. It wasn't. It was an addiction, and I was the last one to see it. Richard's sock system was perfectly fine. My system was comprehensive. A spreadsheet was involved. The look on his face wasn't anger. It was a deep, quiet concern that cut right through my ridiculous project management of his footwear. I wanted to argue, to explain the logic of my categorization, but the evidence was right there in my hands. I was dressed for a day of doing, with nowhere to go. This didn't start in retirement. It snuck in years before, wearing the disguise of competence. After I sold my last business, I kept my calendar in 15-minute blocks. I scheduled check-in calls with my daughter Sophie about her company when she hadn't asked. I once blocked out 3 hours to research patio furniture. Richard asked me over his coffee what exactly there was to research for that long. I had no good answer. The truth was, an empty spot on my calendar created a low-grade anxiety, a hum in the background that said I was forgetting something vital, that I was being left behind. It makes everyone around you adjust to your pace, even when they don't have to anymore. My son Jonathan in New York would get my quick thoughts emails at 7 a.m. his time. My former assistant, whom I'd promised to leave alone when I retired, still felt obligated to answer my just wondering texts within the hour. I was a retired woman broadcasting urgency. The breaking point was Sophie. She finally said to me after one of my unsolicited strategy sessions, "Mum, you're retired. I'm the one who's supposed to be tired." It stung because she was right. I was exporting my own unease, my own need to feel useful, onto the people I loved. They were still running their races, and I was trying to hand them water from the sidelines when they weren't even thirsty. Breaking this habit meant learning to sit in the quiet without immediately reaching for my phone or a notebook. It was physically uncomfortable at first. I'd go out to the terrace with my coffee, and my hand would twitch for a pen to make a list. The silence felt heavy, like wasted time. I told Richard it felt unproductive. He looked at me, that steady, quiet look of his, and said, "Wasting it according to who?" I had no answer for that either. I started thinking about my mother. She never ran a business. She ran a household on very little, raised 2 children, and always looked composed. One of her daily rituals was to sit with a cup of tea, just looking out the window. No book, no knitting, just sitting. I used to think she was just resting. Now I understand she was practicing a kind of presence I had forgotten how to have. She was comfortable in the quiet. She didn't need to fill it to prove she deserved it. So I began to practice. A coffee, just the coffee. A walk without a podcast. Sitting with my granddaughter Claire while she told me a long, meandering story about her stuffed animals, and not mentally drafting an email while she talked. The first few times the anxiety hummed louder. Then, slowly, it began to fade. The space it left wasn't empty. It started to fill with different things. The sound of the palms in the wind. The exact shade of the late afternoon light on the terrace. The way Richard's face looks when he's reading and finds something funny. Letting go of that constant need to be productive is the real work of retirement. It starts long before your last day. It's not about being lazy. It's about redefining what useful looks like. Useful isn't always output. Sometimes useful is being a calm presence. Sometimes useful is noticing things. Sometimes useful is just being there, fully, in a room that is no longer an office, in a day that is no longer a series of appointments, in a life that you finally get to inhabit instead of manage. If you've caught yourself managing sock drawers, or creating intricate plans for a simple errand, or feeling that twitch of unease when your calendar is clear, you're not alone. I see you. Leave a comment below and tell me what your sock drawer moment was. I read them all, and I promise no spreadsheets will be created in response. Have you ever found yourself reorganizing sock drawers in the link of Simplifectively Do? Have you ever found yourself reorganizing sock drawers in the nature of important within very person? If you've lived in there, the blood from no to make every life place to be productive. If you do that, the less line where the day be reducively beginning, the greater as well will leave being back. Have you ever found yourself something that didn't need your help at all? I have. And it took a sock drawer to show me the habit I should have broken years ago. Hey everybody, welcome back. My name is Diane Kaufman. I want to talk about the one thing that made my retirement transition so much harder than it needed to be. It's not about money. It's the need to be needed. The constant, quiet itch for urgency. Long after I sold my last business, I was still scheduling my days in 15-minute blocks. I'd check my phone for a ping that wasn't coming. I thought this was just being good at my job. It wasn't. It was a kind of addiction, and I was the last one to see it. The moment I knew it was a real problem was a Tuesday morning, about 6 months in. I was in our bedroom, dressed in a blazer for no reason, and I caught myself deep in Richard's sock drawer. He has a perfectly fine system. Socks go in the drawer, that's it. But I was there, creating a spreadsheet in my head, categorizing by colour and fabric blend. He walked in and found me holding a stack of his black socks. He didn't look angry. He looked deeply, quietly concerned. He said, "You're managing socks now. We need to talk." I wanted to argue. I wanted to explain the efficiency of it all. But the evidence was right there in my hands. I was optimizing something that didn't need it, dressed for a meeting that didn't exist. That sock drawer was just a symptom. The habit is filling empty space with manufactured urgency. I'd schedule check-in calls with my daughter Sophie about her business when she hadn't asked. I'd create complex, multi-tab itineraries for a simple weekend trip to see my son Jonathan. If my calendar had a blank spot, I'd feel this low-grade anxiety. I once blocked out 3 hours to research patio furniture. Richard asked me what exactly there was to research. I had no good answer. I just needed the task. The cost wasn't just my own peace. It made everyone around me adjust to my retired pace, a pace that had no reason to be so frantic. Jonathan in New York would get my quick thoughts emails at 7 a.m. his time. My former assistant, Maria, who I'd promised to leave alone, still felt obligated to answer my just wondering texts. Sophie finally said it plainly to me one day. She said, "Mom, you're retired. I'm the one who's supposed to be tired." It stung because she was right. I was still operating like the CEO of a company that had quietly dissolved, and I had everyone I loved still on the payroll. So how do you break a habit you've built over 40 years? You start by noticing what you're actually doing. For me, the first thing I noticed was that I couldn't sit in the quiet. I'd make myself a cup of coffee, go out to the terrace, and within 2 minutes I'd be reaching for my phone or a notebook. It felt physically uncomfortable, like an itch. I remembered my mother, Miriam. She could just sit with a cup of tea looking out the window for 20 minutes. No book, no podcast, just sitting. I tried it. The first time I lasted maybe 90 seconds before I got up to straighten the cushions. It felt like wasting time. I told Richard that. He was reading the paper and he didn't even look up. He just said, "Wasting it according to who?" I had no answer for that either. The second thing was realizing I was still trying to solve problems that weren't mine. Sophie was telling me about a supplier issue at her company, just venting the way you do, and I immediately launched into a 3-point action plan. I could see her face just close off. She said, "Mom, I've got it," and I knew she did. I'd taught her how, but my brain was so wired for the fix, for the actionable item, that I couldn't just listen. That was the harder shift, from being the solver to being the witness. It happened again with my grandson, Noah. He was explaining some complicated trading card scheme, and I realized I was only half listening, mentally drafting an email about something else entirely. I made myself stop. I just watched his face, heard the silly, elaborate rules he was inventing, and for the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about what was next. I was just there. That was the emotional peak for me. It wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, but it was the moment I understood my new role. Richard noticed the difference a week later. He said, "You seem lighter." I told him I finally felt like I'd graduated from the job of being busy. The third thing, and this is the one I'm still working on, is letting go of the idea that my value is tied to my output. I built my life on that equation. For decades it served me. It built the businesses, the security, the life we have now. But the equation doesn't solve for this part. It can't. I was on a flight last month, first class, a window seat, heading nowhere in particular, and I had this sudden clear memory of being in my 30s, in a middle seat, exhausted, flying back from a client meeting I'd nailed. I felt so useful, so necessary, and sitting there on that plane last month, with all the space and quiet I'd earned, I didn't feel that at all. I just felt quiet. And my first instinct was to feel guilty about that, to feel like I was failing at retirement because I wasn't producing the feeling I thought I was supposed to have. That's the habit right there. Not the busyness itself, but the belief underneath it. The belief that a day only counts if you can point to what you accomplished in it. My mother never had that belief. She had a different metric. A day counted if you noticed the light change in the afternoon, if you heard a story all the way through. I'm trying to learn her metric. It's harder than any business plan I ever wrote. The emotional peak for me, the real one, happened right here on this terrace. Claire was over. She was telling me one of her long, winding stories about her stuffed animals, and I was listening, really listening, when she stopped mid-sentence and looked at me. She said, "Grandma, your face is different." I asked her what she meant. She said, "You're not thinking about your phone." And she just went back to her story. That was it. No big revelation. But I felt something unclench. A knot I hadn't even known was there. I wasn't the CEO. I wasn't the consultant. I was just the grandmother on the terrace, and for that minute it was the only title that mattered. Richard brought me a cup of tea later. He didn't say anything. He just put his hand on my shoulder for a second. And the quiet didn't feel like something I needed to fill. It just felt like peace. So here's what I actually think. Letting go of that need to be constantly productive isn't a side project of retirement. It's the main work. It starts long before your last day, and it's not about becoming lazy. It's about learning a new metric for a day. My mother's metric. Does the day count if all you did was listen to a 6-year-old's story all the way through? I'm starting to believe it does. It might count more. If something in here landed for you, go ahead and like the video. It helps more than you'd think. And I'd really like you to leave a comment. Tell me, what's the one harmless thing, the sock drawer, the overplanned trip, that made you realize your own habit? Or if you're not there yet, what's the version of that you're most worried about? I read every single one. I find them useful. More useful than I expected to. Subscribe if you want to see the follow-up. I'll do one on what comes after you put the spreadsheet away. All right. Thanks for watching.